Hey Destructoid, my name is Luke Williams. I'm a game designer at Boss Studios, and I'm just going to show off a little bit of Worlds Adrift, kind of explain what the game is and hopefully show off some cool stuff. So first of all, I'll just explain what the game is. So it's kind of Wind Waker, Skies of Arcadia inspired. The whole kind of world it's like an open world sandbox, massively online sort of game. You essentially sort of start on an island, and then you will build like an airship of your own, either by yourself or with as many people as you can gather. And on these sort of islands there'll be wildlife, there'll be sort of resources like sort of ruins, treasures, all that kind of stuff. And through that you can basically build a better airship and fly further. All the while, of course, you're going to have sort of other players in the world doing the same thing, and some of them might sort of try and kill you, invade you, board your ship, do whatever they want really. Take over regions of the sky, it's kind of up to them. You can see I can sort of, at the moment I'm in the spectator cam just to kind of give you an idea of the world. We have sort of these huge sort of dynamic clouds that are basically like the landscape of the world. And later on we'll have these huge kind of weather barriers that your ship will have to be powerful enough to fly through. There'll be sorts of sandstorms and sort of typhoons and stuff like that. At the moment the islands are kind of at reasonably sort of basic level of development. They've got kind of trees and stuff on and sort of basic shapes, but they don't have a huge amount of features and sort of like rivers and all that kind of stuff that we're still sort of adding. But yeah, and the clouds are all deterministic. They're all sort of exist in real time, and people can kind of hide in them. You can fly into them for cover, and obviously if you fly into them you can't see anything. But they'll kind of like, because they move throughout the day, sometimes islands will be hidden, sometimes they'll kind of be revealed as you sort of fly around. And you'll need to keep your ships kind of fueled to keep going. So you're always kind of on the hunt for sort of these sort of new islands. And they'll be like biomes, so when you do fly through sort of like the sandstorms, you'll find sort of like desert islands and stuff. But we don't have that kind of in the world yet. You can see we kind of got like a wide variety of shapes here. So this one's kind of like an island that's been split in two. Another thing that's kind of big, you'll see like suddenly there's like, oh, why are these random things on the floor? And that's just because from earlier playtests, someone had a camp here. So one of the big things of the world is it's entirely persistent. So stuff that you do to the sort of world, so you can see here someone's like been cutting down trees and stuff, that'll all persist. Any sort of ship crashes or wreckages, and as you see here, there's a camp where someone was building a ship. Those will all sort of remain in the world indefinitely. So a big part of the sort of game is while you are sort of looking for sort of new schematics to build new parts, you can actually just sort of find stuff by other players, or you can rip it off the ships themselves, like as they're flying through the sky if you really wanted to. But you can kind of find old camps, old wreckages, all that kind of stuff, and that'll all sort of persist as you kind of sort of just roam the world. So there's a ship and some, this was us playing with physics earlier because I might not mention before, the game is a huge physics sandbox. It's multiplayer networked physics. So what we were doing here is we were basically spawning in a ship and then sort of removing the spine of it just to kind of imitate a crash, and then all the parts that are attached to that ship just kind of rain down over this mountain. And that, you know, and everyone who is, you could have 1,000 players all watching the same thing. As this sort of, all these parts would cascade sort of down the mountain. I'll play around with those in a minute, you can kind of see what we mean. The world's kind of an unknown to you as you start. There's no map that you don't draw yourself. It's kind of like Phantom Hourglass style. So whenever you get to like kind of a new island, you can open up your map and just draw what you want or make notes or something like that. And that's kind of what we wanted was kind of knowledge is sort of valuable. So if you're like navigating storms and stuff, if you find a particular sort of safe passage for a storm, you can kind of mark that on your map that you've drawn, and that's like valuable information to you. But that information is not easy to share. You could wiki it like an image, but it'll be an image of your map, which, you know, and considering the world will be thousands of kilometers wide, that image could be from anywhere. So it's gonna be hard to kind of correlate where that safe passage is. Okay, so here, like now we're actually in the game, running around as a character. It's like fairly kind of standard sort of third-person controls. You sort of explore these islands on foot, be sort of ruins, and obviously you've seen we've kind of cut down quite a few trees. So while it's kind of not completely final yet, but the way, so we have this kind of like a harvest tool, I guess, to kind of erase any of the annoying bits of like craft an axe or a shovel and all that sort of stuff. This kind of thing can repair and sort of break stuff down, and it's kind of used universally. But because we know like you build airships and stuff, you need to collect resources, but we tried to make them kind of, we have a physics world, so we try and take advantage of that as much as we can. So in the case of like chopping down trees, actually the trees can kind of be cut sort of wherever you kind of choose, so you can actually remove all the branches off if you kind of wanted to. The exact sort of harvesting things a little bit, I'm just clicking right now, but you will actually have to like sort of saw them. Well, it will take a little bit longer just to cut through them. But yeah, so the trees actually have little like sort of like just sort of segments, and they'll just fall apart. And then those are kind of physics objects as well. So I just slice through there, you know, and that top bit will fall off, and I can sort of cut there. Then so I pull it with my rope there, and I'll roll off and roll down the hill. You have to kind of be careful sometimes, because all of the damage and stuff in the game is based on how much something weighs than how fast it hits you. So if I kind of cut down a tree and it lands on me, that can hurt or potentially kill you. So we've already been sort of, so you saw me use the grappling hook earlier. Now it's kind of, we have sort of physics behaviors sort of our skill systems, I guess, and there's no sort of leveling or XP or mechanics like that. So kind of like Surgeon and Iron Bread, I know it's a strange comparison, but the way you kind of can move around islands is all sort of based on inertia and physics, and the way you actually attach your grappling hook is with the right mouse. If I actually just click, it'll sort of point where my cursor is. Now that's kind of there's no firing animation yet, that's kind of placeholder. But if you kind of hold down right mouse, it locks the camera, you can still move around, but then it will kind of connect to wherever you let go. And that's kind of useful if you sort of just charge off without dying here. Charge off an island, and then sort of grapple on. Let go, you can let go when you want, and it will carry the physics through, so that's why I'm doing like sort of spins and rolls and stuff like that. Sort of let go before I sort of slam into the rock there. And the rope can kind of reel in and reel out. So when you reel in, you're kind of getting a lot of speed. And again, the rope is all, it uses physics as well, so I found someone's inventory there. So for example, you can kind of use, this is just kind of like a demonstration, the fact that it kind of, you know, it wraps around stuff as well, except for that tree obviously, but yeah, and that's kind of like, as you're kind of swinging around, it sort of does wrap around rocks, and that you can kind of almost get a slingshot effect. So that's sort of how you can essentially like launch yourself from one ship to another, which is kind of cool. And actually the kind of like the swing I'm doing, the sort of like little spins, just came about because we wanted like cool animations like Spider-Man style, obviously. And we were kind of thinking, how do we do the animations for that? Like, you know, is it like a chance every time you sort of let go of the rope, you know, that kind of stuff. And then we thought, well, let's try and use sort of physics. Let's just carry the sort of momentum through of like, you know, when your character is sort of lets go of the rope. So that means that, you know, when you are sort of, when you do just kind of let go, if you just twist the camera, you can do like a little spin and all that kind of stuff. And actually sort of, it just feels a lot nicer because it's you doing the sort of cool tricks and not just a pre-canned animation, which we thought was quite nice. You're sort of always taking into account how much you can carry, which is sort of your drive to find new stuff, because your ship can only sort of carry a certain amount of weight, so you want the stuff that it can carry to be the best it could possibly be. So I said, these kind of just get crafted and they just get dumped into the world as physics objects. You can't store them in your inventory or anything like that. So this core is now built. It's probably too heavy to sort of pull off there. Yes, it is, but it's fine. And while you're actually, you'll notice there's like sort of a ring around the sort of shipyard, and this is like your sphere of influence. So if, for example, I put that here, I can't pick that up anymore because it's not inside this kind of sphere. So I could, no, I kind of can't get that back in now actually. Oh, wait, yes I can. Just craft one of these. And so I said this is a core that basically, right now the ship's being suspended by the shipyard. So in order for it to fly, it needs one of these to kind of counter the weight to keep it in the sky. Now you can build mini versions of these, which is what I've just done, and that actually like lowers the weight of this. So I've actually been able to like just sort of pull it there. Let's see if I can roll it back into the sphere of influence, and I can actually sort of I should be able to pick it up, hopefully. Let me just use my rope there. That rock's going to get me, I think. No, there we go. Right, roll you in, take that off. I'm going to pick it up now. So now this is very important. You can basically, when you're shipbuilding, you can kind of put stuff anywhere. So I can put this on the top here. Now ships do have multiple decks. I'll show you one of those later. But if I put it here, that's what's keeping my ship afloat. That's kind of an easy target for anyone who sort of wants to take me out. So what you want to do is generally your sort of like tactics in combat, stick your important stuff under here. So I now put a ship core there. If I start building so your ship needs a few items to let it fly, one of which is a fuel tank, so I'm just going to build one of those. And while that's building, I'll go over here and build what essentially is how you defend your all your important parts. So I'm just going to build a ship panel here. And so what you'd basically be doing is paneling up your ship, and you'll see that I'll curve to the hull, and that's basically how you kind of create plating for your ship. You can build the panels out of any wood or metal. Now the metals will have loads of different properties. They'll be like iron, steel, and all that kind of stuff. And they'll have weight to them. So you're kind of like balancing up like how much sort of protection you can sort of have, but then also how much your ship can actually carry. So you might find that you probably want to like prioritize your heavy plating for like around where your important stuff is. So I've got a fuel tank and the core under there, so I probably want to kind of focus all of my heavy plating on there. At the moment we don't have all of the sort of different metals in, so I'm actually just crafting there's just a metal type. But obviously that wouldn't be the case in the full game. So there's a few more basic parts to actually get the ship flyable. There's obviously the helm. And then I'll use the other one. So you can see this is how the kind of, if you imagine right now I'm obviously having to go between all of the crafting stations myself and sort of building stuff. But if you've got multiple players, then it becomes a lot easier and you can do this a lot quicker. So I'm going to watch this out. This is one of the things you have to be careful of where you construct your ship. Don't shove me off the edge, that was close. Because the whole game is physics enabled, stuff like mishaps like that can sort of, if you've just spent a lot of resources building like a good engine and then it just clean rolls off the edge because you kind of put your crafting station in the wrong place, that's kind of one of the things you have to be aware of. So let me just get up on here. Let's make sure this is in a decent spot. And when we say this is like a sandbox, so right now the ship's not really big enough, but this helm on the top makes sense, lets the pilot kind of basically be able to see. So he can look around and that's kind of easy for them to sort of fly. And you can see here it kind of can tilt and pitch and turn, and there's a throttle and stuff. It can float because I've already got a core. I've got no engines, so I can't actually move any sort of anywhere. So that's fine. But because of, I can actually just put multiple helms on if I wanted to. And that's what we've seen when people kind of have multiple decks on their ships, is they'll put a second helm like below deck. It can't see as much, but it's kind of like the backup. So there's not like a system for you to sort of build these backup things, or sort of parts, it's just the game lets you do that. If I do come across a wreckage, I can actually sort of scan these engines and any part really to see if it's any good, and then I can attach these lifters to it and just take it with me. So if you imagine if I just found this, I can just be like, yep, sweet, I'm bringing this with me. Take it kind of back to your ship and just strap on like a part to, you know, a random part you found that was built by someone probably weeks ago or months ago. Just find that part and just take it with you back to your ship. So you're kind of, your ship over time sort of can almost have like a little history attached to it of all these parts. Oh yeah, like we found that like last week on this like desert island and that kind of stuff. So you're almost building this history through your ship as well. And so the way kind of like the sort of, I guess, persistence of character kind of works is, so I'll just stick that onto the wing there so he looks a little bit cooler now. Is you kind of, as you go around the world, you can sort of build, you find basically schematics, which is, for example, how I have that engine or that wing. And you can kind of like learn them, so as you do find them in like ruins, or maybe someone still has them in inventory, and you just sort of rob them of it. Those kind of stay with you. So while it might take you sort of weeks of playing to sort of build up a lot of like a really good ship, if your ship does get destroyed, in which case it can't be recovered, when it's taken out, that's it. So if it does get destroyed, you kind of have a shortcut back to it because you don't forget all of those schematics you've learned. So you can actually just sort of quickly sort of piece together the ship. Again, your character can kind of, as you see, I'll put a respawner on there. So if I ever die, there's like oops. So I can attach that and it'll stick my name on it. So that's kind of a sort of storytelling element, I guess. Like if you do find a shipwreckage, you can kind of see the names of basically who was on it. And sort of feel bad that maybe you caused the crash. Yeah, so now when I die, I'll actually appear back on the deck of my ship. So if I'm sort of like, you know, I'm swinging around and I sort of kill myself or I fall into the abyss or something like that, I'll drop what was in my inventory. That'll be lost, kind of Dark Souls style, but I can go back to it and sort of find it in the world, assuming it doesn't kind of roll off the island. So death it's not like hugely punishing. Your character can die as many times as they want. As long as you've got one of these, you're fine. If this does get destroyed, you'll kind of appear like, I guess, in like a universal graveyard, which is just like one of these, but they're sort of in these structures that float above islands. And you'll just appear by one of those nearby. So like as an attacking player, if you are going to do some piracy, you have a few options. You can kind of take out the fuel tanks, then the ship runs out of fuel and it can't move. You can take out the helm, then it can't move. If you're planning on sinking it, you can just sort of take out the cores. Or if you actually just want to take it over, you can invade, take out these things, so then the crew can no longer respawn their ship, and then you're free to do with it as you please. So you have stuff like what's the fuel in your ship, you know? So I can actually just construct a fuel gauge here. And as you can see when I'm here, like I can kind of see the metal post there from where I placed it. So if I kind of want the pilot, if it's you or if it's a friend, you can kind of just set up like, right, I want the pilot to know sort of how much fuel is in the ship. So I can just stick that there. As long as it's attached to the ship in any place, it'll tell you how much fuel we have. So we've got 68 fuel in the ship. And as you can see now, I'm sort of take over the helm. The pilot can be like, okay, cool, that's how much fuel I have. So you can kind of keep an eye on that. And you can put that sort of gauge wherever you want. Or any of these instruments. There's a few. So there's the artificial horizon, which will sort of any pilot would want really. Then there's sort of a compass. There's the airspeed. There's the altimeter, which will tell you how sort of high you are. Not in that way. So I can sort of find that and then stick that there. Right, so that's kind of helpful pilot information. But let's say in the much larger ships, if you're sort of, you know, while the pilot might want this information, like you might be like way down the other end of the ship, because these ships can kind of be like tens of meters long, and eventually hundreds. But if you're way away, you might sort of know, like, you know, how high are we? You can just stick down to the mast there. Once you have these instruments wherever you want, you can place as many as you want, and it's just there. So, you know, just you can kind of just sort of, you have kind of the freedom to place whatever you want, sort of where on your ship. And so now you kind of just pick your destination, really. I'm out in the sky. The ship has rolling, has banking, has pitching. So that plays a big part when you actually have cannons on board and you have sort of someone, you know, sort of, well, extra crew on deck, really. The ship, again, while it's moving, you're free to move around. So it's tilting a little bit there, but that's fine. I can still stand on it. And everything still applies. I can jump off, I can use my rope, I can kind of swing around. This is how you kind of do your ship evading. That's close. Oh, I lost a panel as well. That's probably when it hit the ground. So here I'm just dangling off a ship, I'm just trying out our explosives, a little bit placeholder, but you can get the idea of sort of using, sneaking aboard a ship and then sort of planting some explosives. And then that will go off and boom, and then everything sort of rains down. Sort of, panels will break off, and they'll keep their kind of curvature, so more of that kind of persistence there. You kind of see what it was attached to almost. If I just jump up here, so another element of like, oh yeah, I haven't shown off the hang glider yet. So this is like, you'll see my backpack. This is just like a hang glider, which is, so the abilities you get in the game, because you don't level up and earn new abilities, but you will sort of gain schematics to build new equipment. So in this case, I have a hang glider backpack, which you wouldn't start with, but in conjunction with kind of your hook shot, you can kind of combine that with the sort of hang glider. Your movement options are suddenly sort of increased. You can imagine sort of this is pretty handy for invading enemy ships or sort of getting away from sort of danger and stuff. So yeah, going over there. So the progression in the game, as I mentioned, is kind of, you have like you can kind of gain knowledge, which you can use to kind of generate schematics. So while you are going from island to island, and you can kind of find chests or just loot them off other players from what they found, there's like a kind of permanent way of you sort of acquiring these sort of schematics, and that's through sort of, because I mentioned before about drawing the map, it's all part of sort of discovering the old world. So we have like a huge backstory about how the world kind of came the way it is the way it is. So there is actually like, we do have what the old world looked like, what the cultures were, what their sort of traditions were, what they were called, and all this kind of stuff. So we're piecing together sort of like lore bits, and every sort of part of lore you find will go into like a huge logbook, and that again will like kind of give you knowledge. Sort of photographing stuff, so we actually have a camera here. And, you can take pictures of sort of like foliage, you can take pictures of creatures, and all sorts of stuff, and that will essentially give you knowledge again. And when you sort of earn enough knowledge, you can actually use it to sort of generate a schematic, and you can specialize that over time. So the more schematics you sort of generate, the more you can specialize them. So if you do want to just focus on getting sort of engine schematics, you can just keep doing that, and you'll get rarer and rarer ones as you do it. But the thing is with knowledge, it's not really currency or XP because it's finite. Every island has a set amount of ruins. Every kind of creature has a set amount of behaviors. So you can only kind of sort of earn as much as an island will allow, then you have to move on to keep finding more. But the camera we use for like a bit of fun as well, so you can actually sort of build picture frames on your ship, because why not? So as you can see, we can have like, I'll attach myself to that. So you've got like the names of the ship, and you've got like here's a picture I took earlier, which is of us building our ship. You can click on the picture frame, you can kind of put sort of any picture you want. So you've got one of the island here. You can have a selfie I took earlier from an older version of the game. There's a picture of a picture, which is always good. Let's stick that one in there, that's nice. Yeah, and so this is like, when we talk about this kind of persistence, you could find a wreckage of this ship, and as you go through it, you'll be finding sort of the logs that people have written, sort of like the pictures they've taken of their adventure. Those could be like months old. But yeah, and just going through that, and sort of maybe someone has a picture of like a crazy ass creature they found, and sort of the players are actually building the history. At least like we have the backstory and the lore of the old world, but this new world that the players kind of inhabit, the backstory and the sort of history is built by them. So the wreckages is from when you crashed or when some other person crashed, and as you kind of go through those wreckages, you'll see pictures, you'll see the names of the crew, and like you can kind of almost like piece together the adventure they had or something. So it's kind of, that's what we're super excited about that this lets us do. And when we talk about the whole world being physics-based, so when you do find materials, say like iron is heavier than aluminium, if you build your cannonballs out of iron, it's going to hit harder. They're going to do more damage. So that's kind of how we sort of determine all of that stuff. And as I said, this is a huge ship. It's got little lights on, so when it gets dark, you can put some torches on. You can see the pilot's got a proper helm here with all the sort of tools he would need or sort of information to fly. And then down below, obviously, here's the crew respawners. I'll attach them to that one. So this one has like 3 crew members. Every person of the crew needs one of those on. You've got your fuel tanks. This one needs a hell of a lot of cores, as you can see, because it's trying to hold up a huge ship. More fuel tanks, kind of more sort of storage crates everywhere. Most of the art here is still pretty kind of work in progress. But you know, you can look out the window and sort of see islands off in the distance and stuff like that. And I like the idea. I've always liked the idea of sort of huge stuff moving through the sort of skies, and you can just sort of chill out, sit down, sort of craft stuff. But you basically have your salvage tool. Again, it's the same thing you'd use to like harvest trees or melons and stuff like that. You can just use it on any part in the game. And I can just sort of, if you imagine this ship was actually sort of completely encased, I can just take away a panel, that'll fall away, and then I can just sort of jump inside and sort of wreak havoc on this ship. And you know, they might not even realise until, of course, they sort of start dropping out the sky because I've been sabotaging their cores. But let's explode the ship. Now what I'm going to do now is basically erase that whole spine, the whole deck of the ship, which means that every part will become a free part. So I can kind of demonstrate the sort of scale of mental physics we can go to with this sort of thing. And this is, again, this will all be sort of networked server stuff, so everyone will actually see the same thing and be crushed by the same sort of engine. So you can see you do that, boom, everything sort of becomes a free part. That'll all just sort of rain down the rocks and sort of rain off the island, and a huge glory of physics. And then anyone sort of coming along now can just sort of salvage all these parts and sort of, you know, see what they like. They found a wreckage. They can sort of scavenge through it like vultures. Sort of pick out what they think is quite nice. And you know, I could build a shipyard here and just sort of attach all these parts. There's all my wonderful instruments. The compass still works even though it's not actually attached anymore. Sort of, they'll always tell me what north and south is at least. Yeah, so that's the kind of extent of the sort of destruction side of things you can get. And as I said, I can come back in 6 months' time, and assuming no one's come to salvage all those parts or take them away, they'll still be there. So yeah, that's like sort of a basic overview of where we're at with Worlds Adrift right now. As I said, it's sort of a huge sort of physics-based sort of sandbox with potentially infinite amount of players, exploring kind of these flying islands in the sky, exploring resources, finding sort of lost technology that, you know, allows your ship to kind of go where no one else has gone before, or perhaps survive longer than everyone else. Thanks for Destructoid for having me. This is your look at Worlds Adrift. If you want to kind of follow sort of details in the game, there's like obviously Twitter/Worlds Adrift. There's worldsadrift.com. We have our kind of forum set up there now. That sort of, you know, everyone can kind of just come in and contribute. And yeah, we've got a pretty open development, so we're always sharing lots of cool stuff. And yeah, when we have the kind of like the betas and the alphas kind of coming up, and we'll be sort of kind of getting in sort of like a select few players to sort of get in there and test the game out. So exciting stuff ahead.